Morning. This is the HANDS project, and it is a design exercise using patterns, using balance, using space, and the main thing is we're going to talk about line. A line, when it overlaps itself, becomes a shape. So we're going to have lots of different shapes, and we're going to create filling in areas with patterns inside those shapes. So how do we start? Before I read all the directions, the first step is to take our white piece of paper. We're going to trace our hand, lay your hand out, trace around with a pencil, turn the paper, lay your hand out. You want your hand to spread out as open as possible every time you turn the paper. So when you're done, you should have 4 tracings going around your hand 4 different times. Every time the hand comes on the paper, that is the base. So when it talks in the directions about fill the base with a pattern, the base is the wrist area of your hand. Once you have 4 base patterns established, your drawing will look like this. This is the base pattern: wavy lines, straight lines, cubes or squares, and then little circles. The idea is you work across filling in these different spaces is to not put a design next to itself, not for them to have a common border. So you could place this design over here, but you couldn't put this design here and here, even if you change the directions of the lines. They have to be separate from one another. There are also variations of designs. Here's our squares, but here are squares with a black background. Here are the squares, and here are the squares where they're colored in solid. Let's see, these are the wavy lines going vertically, and here are the wavy lines going horizontally. So you can change the directions of some of them. You can fill in patterns. So you have a variety of different patterns. The key is that they could share a pattern at an intersection. This example would be an intersection. So you could have these lines here, and you could have a variation of those lines here, because they don't share a common border. They only share this intersection. They only touch right there. So you couldn't have these lines here, and then also here, even if they change directions. You need a different, when they share a border, they need a different pattern. So it's kind of a test as you build across. As you know, the old saying is paint yourself into a corner, and that's why you can do varieties of different pattern designs. They just can't be touching one another. Like this is cubes, that's straight lines, that's wavy lines, and back to straight lines, and back to wavy lines. And you could go across that way if you wanted to, or you can just pick and choose and then put in varieties. Here's circles that are filled in solid. Here are circles that are left open. So this is an example of what not to do. Here's an example where in this area right here, there's X's, 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 and X's, and there's like 3 different patterns in here that you can't see the pattern because it's the same pattern and all that. Here's an example where this part of this pinky and the side of this hand is going on this line right here, and this is the area of the base hand, and this is where it crosses over to another area. This should be a different pattern here, and they're touching one another. The same pattern touching one another. Same thing with the squares. Here the squares are all up here, and then where it comes into overlapping the next hand, it's still squares. Where it overlaps into this area, it's still squares. So they can't share a common border. You have to change those patterns up. Here's another example of one that was done successfully and creatively. There's 4 different base patterns, and you can see where some of this spiral pattern is repeated in some of the areas. There is no pattern unless this pattern with the circles is a variation of this pattern or a variation of this pattern. But here is a pattern with these circles that's not in the base. So you can have different patterns. You can have as many patterns as you want. They just can't touch one another. Can't have your patterns touch one another. Now this area here, this is pretty close. They've changed the direction on it, and because of this dark line, it still stands out. But this is probably not 100% correct. This probably should be more like this pattern here, or any of these other patterns would be here, because these really are too close. Even those they're, oh, these are squares with a dot, and these are long strips with a dot, so that's, I think you can do a better job than that. Now the second part, or part 2, it talks about having a theme. And a theme means that in the base of each hand is a particular theme that you're going to derive all your other patterns from. This is winter, spring, summer, and fall. And you can see there's a Christmas present, I guess, a bow for presents at winter time. There's a sun for summertime. There's a heart for, I guess, Valentine's Day is in the spring. There's another heart. So these shapes should have something to do with the 4 seasons. Here's another example where they picked a theme. And the theme was food. The theme was music. The theme was books. And the theme was, I guess he was an archer, a hunter, the outdoors. So there's areas here where there's more bow and targets. And here's the outdoors with trees and a bunny. Music-wise, there's some more music notes. There's a music stand. For books, there's some writing, like maybe from the pages of books, and there's some more books. So the patterns that are built up in here are from the themes. Here's another example of one done in color. That's a little different. These are M&M shapes. And here's an example we're going to talk about. This one is different than these. This background color is different than the background color here. It's separated by this line. So if you wanted to use these colors in this design, you'd have to set up a different background color than this background color here. So the background color is this light pink here. You would have maybe this purple or this yellow as the background, and that would separate it, and these pieces could be pink or lavender. So it's got to be, the backgrounds have to be different. It's like these backgrounds are different, these colored backgrounds are different. So it sets apart so you can see the shape that's created from when the line overlaps. Have fun!